Good evening. I'm Father James Blomley, and I don't remember what number class this is. It's 5 or something, somewhere in there. But anyway, I don't know if it makes that much difference. Tonight, though, we're going to start what is really the longest chapter in Mr. Crack's book, and one that I think has a lot of implications. But before we start with that, if we may, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, O Heavenly King, O Comforter, O Spirit of Truth, who are in all places and fill all things, treasury of blessings and giver of life, come and dwell within us, cleanse us from every blemish, and save our souls, O Blessed One. In the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, tonight we're on what I believe is chapter 4. It's the longest chapter in the book. Probably somebody said to me the other day that it makes up half of the book, and that's probably more or less right. It is a fairly long one. And so we'll probably take two classes, 2 sessions to go through this. And the title of the chapter is Communicating with Seriously Ill Patients. And it covers a lot of ground, a lot of territory when you get right down to it. But one thing when we start is I want us to understand this, that this book is written, I think, primarily for people who are the relatives or loved ones of people that have come down with a deathly illness, who are going to die and are simply waiting for that day to come. But I think that we can also learn, and there's a lot of things, we can learn it in 2 different ways. We can learn it about how we, as well people, or more or less well people, are able to deal with the people that are really sick. In other words, how can we comfort them? How can we help them? How can we not? How can we avoid doing things that will simply be detrimental to them, or which will disturb their peace and make it difficult for them to go on with what they're going through? But on the other hand, we also should look at this from this point of view. And this point of view is that we're going to be there someday ourselves, unless in some fashion we die quickly, which there's plenty of those deaths as well. But if we may find ourselves in years to come being the people that are in a hospital bed or a hospice bed somewhere with some illness that is not going to be cured, and we are simply waiting for the end of life to come. And so if we read this from both points of view, if we read it from the point of view of being the person who's trying to bring comfort to the person that is sick, and then we read it from the point of view of being the person that is sick and that is ill and that is dying, then I think we can really understand some things. And so it helps, I think, to read this with 2 sets of eyes. Then those are the 2 sets of eyes that we really need. So when we look at this, think about this, and we have to think about yourself. Some people have different dispositions and may be more prone to doing or not doing some things than other people are, just because of the way they're built or the way they're made. But think about each one, and then think about yourself in that position. You know, in a lot of ways, the response of each person, whether they're sick or whether they're healthy, depends on a lot of things. It depends on past experiences regarding illness or death. If somebody comes from a family where somebody died, a lingering death that was very difficult for the family, and just kind of saw this from the outside, that will color all your next experiences of death. To you, it'll all be tinged by this death that you knew that took a long time and just essentially wore the family and wore the poor person that died completely out. And so we have that response as well. We may also have issues if we are a person who is trying to provide comfort, we may find ourselves having to identify and to deal with issues within ourselves over past things, of perhaps some kind of history with this person that is dying, the hurt, maybe there's been hurt in the past, maybe there's been anger or even happiness or unhappiness. And these things can color the way in which we do these things. Other people will sometimes be affected by things that have no place in this. And primarily that would be people who in a lot of ways see these last days as a chance to get grandma to maybe give them the farm, or in some fashion to influence whatever it is that's going to happen when she passes away. And all of that is completely inappropriate and should absolutely not be a part of anybody's thoughts in all of this. And so we kind of go in with perhaps with some of this baggage, and then we also have to kind of deal with the baggage of other people within the family. Some members of the family felt that others were favorites of this person. And people, it can be really strange and really, really, it's silly that people get into these things. And these should not be any part of what is happening when this person is dying as we try to take care of this person. Well, from the point of view of the person that's dying, what they have to do is they have to face reality. And of course, some people are going to be really resistant to doing that. Some people don't want to do that. But eventually, if it lasts long enough and it lingers long enough, you're forced to look at this reality of what reality really is. And if they do this, then they find themselves in this position that really all of us are going to be in. That's the position of having to confront our death, knowing that there's absolutely nothing that we can do or say that is going to change this. That everything that we love and everything that is dear to us is going to be behind us. We won't be a part of it anymore. Later on, we hope certainly as far as the people go that we will be. But all of this, we know as we are sitting there in that bed, slowly dying, that everything is fading away. And that the new reality is not going to be anything like the old reality. And that can be kind of a scary thing. It can be something that can be a very fearful thing. And people may not have the strength or the insight that they need to have some ability to come to grips with what's happening around them, the things that they can see, and then the things that they can see that nobody else can see. Because all of these things, this is an intersection, if you will, of at least two worlds. It's an intersection of the daily world that we live in and the people that we see and we talk to on the phone and that we know and that we love or that we kind of like sometimes. And then the people that come from heaven itself, and the angels and all the messengers of God. And these things, all these things start to interfold. They start to come into the same place. And if you remember in this book, we've seen several instances of this, in fact, over and over again, where she'll say, just as a matter of course, that the person that was dying, that she realized that they were talking to someone or talking silently to somebody and looking with a really fixed look at a particular place. And she's going like, well, obviously somebody's here and that I can't see, but this person can see. And so it becomes this kind of collision, if you will, of worlds, of realities. And we can only see one of those realities. And our job for the people that we love that are going through this is to, number one, prepare ourselves for this because we will be in that place. And then number two, to help our loved one who is dying, to help them to be comfortable, to help them feel love, to help them to know that it's going to be okay in a way. And later on today or maybe next time, we'll be talking about silence. And sometimes silence is the best way to do this. It actually kind of makes some sense. I mean, how many times, I do this a lot. I think a lot of people do. If there's a question they're trying to resolve, or something is bothering them, how often do people just come to the church and sit in an empty church? That's not an uncommon kind of thing for people to do. And silence can be healing. It can be healing, and it can be healing for people when there are other people around, particularly if it's people that they know and that they love. So, the gist of what Mr. Graff is saying in this today is this. That it's important for us, meaning the family, the survivors, the friends, all these people that want to see and be with this person that's dying, it's important for us to be calm. It's important for us to be quiet. It's important for us to be able to simply accept what the person is saying and not to get them agitated. Sometimes, and you actually see this, this is not uncommon either. People will get hysterical. There will be big shouting matches in the room as the person is dying. What do you mean you didn't give the house to me? You gave it to her. She has everything, yada, yada, yada. Other times there'll be these disagreements over one I know personally in a hospital where a mother was dying, and she had specifically said in writing, she said, I don't want anything done to prolong my life. I just want to be able to die. Painkillers are fine. but I don't want to be put on life support, don't want any of those things. And the other daughter was the one who had the authority to do this, and that's what they were doing. And then another daughter showed up and just stormed into the room and demanded that the hospital do this and do that and bring in a ventilator and all this kind of business. And they had to call the sheriff, who actually arrested her and took her away from the hospital. But that couldn't have been very good for the mother, or very comforting for the mother to see her daughter come in and behave in this way. But you see those sometimes, and people can be strange. And our job is to, we're all strange from time to time, but our job when it comes to those that we love is to be consistent, is to be loving, is to be comforting, and to be that presence that can help them go through a very, very difficult time. Well, Metropolitan Anthony kind of talks about this. And he talks about the necessity of being there, having your heart being there. And it's as opposed to just being physically there, right? But to be able to go into a room, to go in and to be silent. Talk quietly, talk calmly, perhaps hold the hand of the person that's dying. But he says the important thing is that we are there with our heart more than we are with our mouth. And so here's what he said about the education of the heart. And this is by the education of the heart, he means how we go and approach people and help people that are in some kind of conflict or some kind of terrible thing. He writes this: if we want to educate our heart, what stands in the way most of all is our fear in the face of suffering, emotional pain, and spiritual tragedy. We are afraid of suffering, and this is why we make our hearts narrow, why we defend ourselves. We are afraid to look and see. We are afraid to listen and hear. We are afraid to see a person suffering and to hear the cry from his soul. This is why we close up. And by closing up, we become narrower and narrower until we become prisoners of our own shut down being. He then gives an illustration, which is a really good one. I had not really realized that corals were exactly like this. But he talks about, they're really microscopic or almost microscopic creatures that live in the ocean. And in order to protect themselves, and they start building these structures around them that they can live in and be safe in, and they'll die when they finish. And those are corals. If you think about coral reefs, all those things are built by microscopic or very small little animals who are looking for a place where they can die in peace. And he says this is sometimes the way that we are. We build these things around us because we don't want to deal with what all's out there. We don't want to do any of these things. And in order to do that, to get rid of that fear, to get rid of that terror, to get rid of the feelings that we might and should have, to get rid of worry about, whether we're going to be exposed to somebody else's suffering, to somebody else's death, we just go ahead and we make our own mausoleum, so to speak. We put ourselves in it and close ourselves off from the world. Well, this is what we do. And we won't think of it in those terms, but this is what we think of a lot. I know of a number of cases where somebody, grandma, grandpa, somebody is in the hospital, the hospice, dying, and people will go, I just don't feel like I can go and see him. I wouldn't know what to say. I don't know how to do this, and which may be true, but there's no magic to this. There's no you go and you tell a joke, you get them to laugh, and then you say, okay, I'm going to go, and they leave. That's a hospital visit for some people. But for people in this kind of condition that is so severe and so life-threatening, really, just to be present, just to be quiet, just to be a part of their environment so that they know that you're there and that you're there because of the love that you have for those people. That's really all you have to know when you go to see a person in this. We have to be calm. We have to be loving. We have to not be hysterical or be exhibiting our own fears, our own hurts. This is no time to say, I can't believe that when mommy died, that grandma gave the farm to my brother who I really hate. This is no time to talk about any of those things. And so we have these things that we do. And so if we have compassion if we have a understanding of what the process is. We don't have to understand the disease. We don't have to understand what exactly is killing grandma. We don't have to understand any of these things. We simply have to understand that we are there to show compassion. And to show compassion is to not express one's emotions, like to break down crying or something like that. To show compassion is something else. And Metropolitan Anthony really described this very well. He said this. He said, we need to train ourselves in such a way that we will be able to respond with all our mind, all our heart, but without attempting, almost physically from within, to force ourselves to feel suffering that is not ours or emotions that do not belong to us. The patient has no need of our living through his pain. He is in need of our creative response to his suffering and his condition. He is in need of a creation response of the sort that will create a response to it, the sort that will move us to action, one which is rooted in respect and in reverence towards him. A person who has a name, specific facial features, a wife, husband, or a beloved one, or who has a child and is of a particular age. This person, whether I like him or not, is important. The worth of each person is expressed in the totality of the life and death of Christ. This is really, I think, is something that we need to take to heart. Oftentimes, we think about, well, what if we were in this role? What if I had a relative that was dying and I needed to go see that relative? But I think what I see a lot of times is people are going, well, if it was my mom or my dad, I'd go, but this is like an uncle. I just don't know. But you know the uncle, and the uncle knows you, and the uncle would appreciate hearing your respect and hearing your quiet words, and your words of peace and your words of comfort to him, and just in a very quiet way. It doesn't have to be within so many people from that you're down the line that you're related to. This simply has a lot more to do with being present and having this compassion. Well, in order to be present, what we talk about and what you see in the book from Mr. Corral is that there is talk about simply being, and I think a lot of times we go into a hospital room of any sort and kind of feel some pressure to say something to entertain the person or to kind of make the atmosphere a little bit lighter or something of that sort. And that's not really necessary. It's simply a matter of going in, perhaps holding a hand, just let this person, if they're saying anything, let them say whatever they're going to say. And just be there to hear them and to listen to them and for them to know that you love them. And that is simply the way that is. And so we have this notion, and we should have this notion that in fact, this is greater than like a goodbye visit, right? I'm going to go say goodbye to grandma. She's going to die sometime soon. Go in, say goodbye. I mean, by itself, there's not anything that bad about that. But if you go in and grandma's alone, you may want to just hang out there for a while. You may want to pull up a chair and just sit quietly next to her. You may want to just hold her hand and do these things that will let her know that there's somebody there and that this person cares for them. Now, that's a funny thing about people that get sick, and this is true whether it's old people or not. I mean, like me, or whether it's younger people, it's always a tragedy, no matter what it is. But I think sometimes we almost unconsciously have this notion that, well, it's her time, it's his time. He was old anyway, and that may be true. It may be true, but that doesn't make this any less of a difficult passage for the person that's going through it, and for the rest of the family who may be closer to that person, whatever that may happen to be. And so that's part of the problem. For us, it's going to be part of the problem. She also writes that apparently in some places, the patient may not even be told what the diagnosis is, but it's always important just to say, here's what it is. This is what the doctors found. And this is what's going to happen. And so they have at least the information to know And like she points out, they can go on the internet and see just how bad it's going to be. Maybe watch a few TV shows where it's featured, but it is still something. This is something that a person, maybe it's not a good idea to leave them in some kind of just not knowing. Just leave them in limbo, knowing that they are dying, but not understanding why. And if you have to make a decision as to whether or not you feel like they actually can deal with this. But it is the kind of thing that is something that would ordinarily be something for the doctors to say, for the nurses. But on occasion, you'll run into somebody and they'll say, "But I don't know what's wrong. They're deathly sick. They're critically ill, and either they haven't been told or they haven't understood." And if they ask, then certainly that may be something to do. Well, what we ought not do, what we have to be very, very careful about happening, is to pretend like nothing is wrong. To say, "Oh, you're going to be fine. They'll get some more medicine. You're going to be good tomorrow. You'll be home by this weekend." Whatever it is we think we're saying, because that, number one, you're telling something false to whoever it is. If we've been told that this is in fact, an absolutely terminal condition, then if it's not terminal, well, that's the grace of God, and we'll give the glory to God for that. But if it is terminal, it's not our place to try to persuade the person suffering that it's not terminal. That's up to God to do that, if in fact that is going to do it. And sometimes the family has this, or parts of the family will have this belief, this conviction that in fact they don't even want to tell the person that they're sick. They'll forbid the doctors to tell them about that. And there's a story that Mr. Graff talks about that is really kind of touching in that way. A middle-aged woman, Olga, and her husband John, when Mr. Graff went into the room for the first time, Olga's husband stopped her and she sternly said that Olga did not know her diagnosis, that under no circumstances should she be told. We went in together and he began to forcefully feed his wife, which is not a good idea. She did not want to eat at all and began crying. John shouted at her, insisting that there was no reason to cry. I could only remain silent, standing on the other side of the bed. Olga then turned away from her husband and looked at me with dark eyes full of tears. All I could say, keeping eye contact, was sometimes things are so painful that one can only cry. Isn't that right, Olga? Without a word, she nodded. She saw that someone had understood her. She died the following day, and her husband became hysterical. He just lost it. Now he felt guilty because of this, by not accepting this reality and being with his wife as that came to fruition. And so he had all this additional grief because of his own behavior, his own doing, thinking what he thought that he could protect his wife from knowing something that would be painful to her. And so some people will face it this way. They simply will try and deny it. And they simply believe, well, of course she's going to get better. I refuse to believe she's not going to get better. And so we don't really want to talk about this at all. I don't want to hear anything. I don't want my wife to hear any of this. I don't want any of this to come out. We're just going to let this resolve itself because I'm sure that it is. I just have no question at all about that. Well, what we have when you get right down to that is that this denial by the rest of the family can have this really bad kind of impact on the person that's actually dying. What we see from that story is that Olga knew she was dying. She knew it. And it may be that nobody had ever told her, but I fully suspect that if you have a terminal illness and your body is just declining and you're wasting away, that you kind of know what's going on. You don't have to see it in black and white. You don't need to see the committee of doctors to tell you. You know that that's what's going to happen. And so even though her husband tried to conceal that from her, or tried whatever he was saying to try and say she was going to be fine, here, eat your dinner, I'll do all of this, then in that case, of course, we have these kinds of things. And this is what we have to guard against. See, a lot of times these things are, they're well-intentioned, I think. People do this, they're badly thought out. It's a bad thing to do. But people do this out of a sense of love, thinking that hiding these things from the person undergoing it is a kindness. But it never is. I mean, we don't want to go in and say, oh, you just wait, it's going to hurt. Like, when do you think? No. We don't need that. But we just need to listen to the person, and they will know. And then if they want to talk about it, if they want to vent, if they want to pray, then we are there for that to happen, to help them with that. That is really what we're looking at, and what you should be looking at from the point of view if you find yourself in a hospital room with a person like this. Just be calm, be loving, be compassionate. And so we deal with those things. Now, there's some other things that I think do at some point in time, if it's possible. Sometimes it's not possible. But if it's possible, if there are issues of forgiveness or issues of alienation, those don't need to be hashed out in a big debate or a big family fight. But if somebody's willing to say or that they are giving forgiveness, or that they say to the person that I'm sorry I did this or said this, can you please forgive me? And give this person a chance to do this. Of all the things that happen or don't happen at the time of death, I honestly think that one of the most important is this idea of forgiveness, and that we have to make amends as best we can. Oftentimes people will feel hurt or alienated by somebody, and at confession I'll say, well, you have to forgive these people. No, I'll get there. I'm not ready to do it now. And the problem is that if they don't do it now, when are they going to do it? And if we die with unforgiven things in our heart, then that's not a good thing. And it's not a good thing for the other person. So I wouldn't want anybody coming into a room with a seriously ill person in it and like raising this and getting into causing some kind of big argument or something. That's not productive. But if a person could come in and simply say, I'm sorry for what I did. Can you please forgive me? And then to say, and you kind of hurt my feelings, and I don't know if you meant to or not, but I forgive you for that. For people to die in a state of forgiveness is extremely important, and it's something that we forget about these days. The historians will tell you that at least in the Middle Ages, that it was not uncommon. People would know in some fashion that they were going to be dying. And one of the things people would almost always ask for is said, go and get whoever, this person from the next farm. Please ask him to come and see me. And so he'd come. And then the person that's dying would say, please forgive me for this, that, whatever it may happen to be. And they did that because the person that was dying knew this had to be done before death occurred. Because our whole entire salvation can rise or fall. It can fall entirely by failure to forgive.